Welcome to the King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and today I'm joined by founder and social entrepreneur Brian Meshkin. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing great, King. How are you?
Doing excellent. Now, one of the first questions I love to ask folks before we get started, just really kind of set the context is, and that's what's your spiritual energy number from zero being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where would you say you fit into that spectrum right now?
Definitely on the higher side. I don't know if I would say, a 10 because I think life is difficult. But from a spiritual standpoint, I definitely think I'm an 8, 9, or a 10 there. I mean, I fundamentally believe. I think it was a French philosopher that said we are rather than human beings looking for a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I try to live that way and believe that thoroughly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as we begin, that's an excellent segue into our next question is, so within that mindset, what do you see as your purpose in life?
I think my purpose in life really comes down to that spiritual aspect. I believe it's for me, and I think it's for all of us, to live our lives in such a way that we can return home to God. I believe we started there in His presence, and we came down on this mission to earth, and we have a purpose, lots of purposes in being here. And then our objective is to return home, but not only just for ourselves, but to also help everybody else return home, because I believe that everybody on this earth who has lived, who currently is living, and whoever will live, that we're all children of God, and we're all united in that way.
Absolutely. Amen to that as well. Now, this is a question I always like to ask people because this term gets thrown out quite a bit. And I always like to ask the person who I believe are exhibiting these behaviors, how would they best define the term conscious leader? So with that being said, how would you define a conscious leader?
I think I learn more about what it means to be a conscious leader every day. So I definitely don't think I am an expert in that. But if I were to look back at my life and say, when did I start to understand this? Honestly, I think it happened when I was like 16 years old. I had been elected as the student body president at my high school in the spring of my sophomore year. So I was going to be serving my junior year. And it was the beginning of my junior year, and we were planning homecoming in October. I think it was like August or September. And I was really frustrated by some people on my executive board that I didn't feel were following through on their commitments. And back then I was, and probably still to this day, I probably still exhibit these behaviors. Sometimes I can be a little impulsive, and it's like, okay, well, if other people aren't going to do it, then I'm just going to get it done myself. And I was getting frustrated. And so I sat down with my principal, Mr. McGregor, who I was very close to, and I expressed my frustration at this. I was like, God, why can't these people follow through on what they say they're going to do? And he introduced me to this Chinese Taoist philosopher. I believe his name was Lao Tzu or something to that effect. And the quote that he shared with me was, when the best leader's work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. And we reflected on that and talked about it. And he asked me, he said, Brian, what do you think that means? And I was like, well, I guess it means instead of people looking to the leader and saying she did it or he did it or he led us or she led us, that everybody feels that because they were a part of whatever it is. In my instance, it was part of the student government, but it could be in a business or in a family or in a nonprofit organization or a municipality or whatever. That everybody feels a sense of ownership, feels that they were a part of the mission, and feels like they contributed something. And so I learned a lot. I learned that, to be an effective leader, you have to inspire others. You have to help them grow and reach their potential. And so over the years, I've had the opportunity, I think, to learn by doing in various different leadership capacities, whether it's in business, whether it's an elected official, whether it's in leading a nonprofit or being on the board of a nonprofit, being a dad in a family, or even church responsibilities where I've had leadership opportunities. You learn by doing, you learn by the mistakes, but I think I've learned to be a conscious leader is really focusing on a growth mindset, not only for yourself, but for those around you, to helping them be the very best that they can be. I remember a superintendent I worked with when I was on the school board. She often said, we need to focus on what's strong and not what's wrong. And I thought that was a really good quote, because I think we can take, if you think of like a SWOT analysis, I think you always try to figure out how to leverage the strengths to overcome the weaknesses, to seize the opportunities, and to blunt the threats. And so it always starts with whatever the strengths are. There may just be one strength or there may be a bunch, but it's focusing there and having a growth mindset, I think, is really what makes people conscious leaders and help people to become the very best they can be.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that answer. Definitely gave me a lot to think about in that context. Now, I know you've accomplished quite a bit in your life. Father, husband, as well as serving in elected office, founder of companies, impact investor. So what would you say of all the things you've accomplished, what are you most grateful for?
Well, I think it goes back to kind of where we started, King. I'm most grateful for a loving God, who's always there for me, sometimes even standing there in the fire with me. There have been times in my life where I felt lonely, but I know I've never been alone. There's a great hymn where there's this phrase where he reaches for my reaching. Sometimes I feel like I'm reaching and sometimes having to reach farther. But I've always felt that he's always there and loves me unconditionally. And I think he loves everybody unconditionally. I don't think I'm anything special. And I say that's probably what I'm most grateful for.
Absolutely. What are 3 behavior traits that you possess that you would say best describe you?
Oh gosh. I'd probably say passionate, charitable, always looking for ways to help people. And I think I'm fiercely loyal.
Excellent qualities. Now, my next question is, we shift to your business. What inspired you to create Profound Ventures?
Well, honestly, Profound became an outgrowth of a previous company that I had started and run for 8 years that ended up having an incredibly tragic ending, very unjust and unfair, and caused me a lot of pain. And so I was honestly looking for something to do to give my heart some time to heal from it. And so with my chief legal officer and my chief technology officer from that company, as well as a friend who we were looking at bringing in as the chief scientific officer, I said, I need some time before I start another venture or run a company or that type of thing. And so I'm just going to help others that are looking to do similar things in healthcare. That's a very broken system in the United States where we can invest in or help people gain investment that are trying to do some good things in healthcare to really help patients and make the world a better place there, kind of solving profound social problems, hence the name Profound Ventures. And so that was the genesis in starting it.
Okay. Now, this term gets thrown out quite a bit, and I think it's a new term relatively to the investing space. A lot of people really don't understand the definition of it, but I'm curious to know how you would define a social impact investor.
It's a great question. It's definitely something, whether it's a social entrepreneur or social impact investor, that's become kind of a term of art as of late. I've oftentimes joked that I guess in the past few years, I've been diagnosed that as someone who's been doing it for a long time. I just didn't know what to call it. But as a social impact investor, I think, all investors are obviously looking for some type of return on their investment. And so the question is, how do you measure that return? Financial return is obviously something that's important because, if you just want to give money away and not get anything back in return except for feeling good about giving the money away, then you can give it to a nonprofit. That's kind of what nonprofit contributions are. So if you're concerned about a particular issue, or you're concerned about a particular health condition, or you want to help people in a certain way, and you just want to say, well, I gave to a cause that was aligned with things that I find are important, then you give it to a nonprofit and hope that they do something good with that money. But your return is that feel good of having given the money. But if you're looking for more than that, you're looking for a way to actually see that money do something and be able to track it and potentially even be able to roll up your sleeves and help that person that you're giving money to, then you can invest as an investor into a company. It's one thing to give money, let's say, to a nonprofit that is trying to do cancer research. It's another thing to invest money into a company that actually has a diagnostic or a treatment to help patients with cancer, to help that actually get to patients. And so I think as a social impact investor, you're not only focused in on a financial return, but you're also focusing in on investing into companies or entrepreneurs or technologies that are really going to have a positive impact. And that could be from a health standpoint, that could be in helping people with social mobility and in moving up the social ladder. It could be education, it could be environment. There's a host of different causes that are important to people's hearts. And that's really where I think being a social impact investor can have a big impact. And sometimes when we see difficult situations, you can't turn on the news and not see difficult situations. Oftentimes people will immediately turn to the government and they'll look to their elected officials and say, well, they need to do something to solve the problem. Well, if you look at the track record, government doesn't solve any problems. There are very few problems that the government solves. But it's actually in the development of new products and new services and new technologies where we're actually able to raise the quality of life of humanity. And you've seen that across the globe.
Absolutely. Is there a project that you completed, financed, founded, that brought you the most fulfillment?
I don't know if I could rank one as the most. It's kind of like saying something's the best. I don't know if the best exists, but I think there's a lot of betters. And so I think whether it was, the very first project that I did something like this that happened unexpectedly after the tragic death of a friend when I was just a teenager. And I led a student effort where we lobbied for and enacted the very first bicycle helmet law in the United States in Howard County, Maryland. And then I did it in Montgomery County, Maryland. And then we got picked up by a new nonprofit that was just planning on being started called the National Safe Kids Campaign that said, hey, will you volunteer and let's take this cause nationwide? So throughout my high school years, I worked and we created this nonprofit. Today it's called Safe Kids Worldwide, and we passed over 300 similar laws all across the United States. And when you look at it's been over 30 years since then. If you look at the data from the government 30 years before to 30 years since, we were able to reduce childhood mortality from bicycle accidents by over 90%. I think that's really, really meaningful. I think that when I was serving on the school board, the opportunity to serve with some really great colleagues and people in the school system and educators and parents to be able to try to tackle issues, whether it was homelessness, whether it was bullying, whether it was a host of different things, that was really, really meaningful. And it wasn't necessarily the votes that were being done, but it was the behind the scenes work to help parents and kids. Whether it was creating that last company that I ran for 8 years called Prove Biosciences, which was the leader in precision medicine and chronic pain. Chronic pain is the world's most prevalent and expensive health condition. 1 out of every 2 Americans will deal with it. It's bigger than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease combined. And because of the amount of people in pain looking for answers, that contributed to the opioid abuse crisis, which is the leading cause of preventable death in the United States now. And we were able to develop a technology that not only saved money. I mean, we saved Medicare like $73 million a year, but we also had the only technology in the literature, published in peer-reviewed journals that could predict who would misuse opioids with 96.7% accuracy. So we were able to save a lot of people's lives. That was really meaningful, working with some great people and great researchers. And there's just been lots of them. Some don't work out. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. But man, when you really land the ones and you just see the impact in people's lives, whether it's saving their lives or it's helping them go through a really difficult time, there's just nothing better than being a small part of helping people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, all the things you just laid out and reading through your bio, you've done some pretty impressive things. And a lot of these higher purpose activities require working with others. So what are your thoughts about co-creating with others to achieve a higher purpose?
I think it's critical. I think that we don't honestly do anything in our life by ourselves. We aren't even born by ourselves. It's not like we hatch out of an egg. We're relying upon our mom to give birth to us, So I think co-creation is critical. One of the most fun things I love doing is having kind of a group of like-minded people or people that are passionate or interested in something and just being in front of a whiteboard and brainstorming and kind of thinking through the problem and drawing lines and bubbles and ideas and saying, okay, then how do we do this? And how do we bring these people together? And every idea, as you kind of erase and iterate and grow, crystallizes over time, and you can't do that by yourself. I've tried doing it. I have a whiteboard in front of me. I whiteboard all the time. It's boring doing it by yourself. It's so much better when you can have someone say, "Oh no, that sucks. That's not a good idea. We should think about it this way." Or, "Oh, have you thought about doing it this way?" Because everybody brings their own lens that they look through life on, and experiences and expertise. And that ability to just kind of have that momentum of co-creating with people, it's really, really enjoyable. And it always, I think, makes everything better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, of all things that you do, what do you do in life that just brings you fulfillment?
Oh, um, well, I mean, there's kind of like, big things and then there's small things. I mean, I love playing the piano. That's something that's kind of just real personal that, whatever emotion I'm feeling, sadness or anger or joy or whatever, just to be able to tickle the ivories is kind of an emotional release. But I would say kind of the big things, I would say probably first, I love my faith, whether it's going to church or performing ordinances in our temples for deceased relatives or serving others. I love being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Second, I would say probably I've loved being a parent and a husband. I think it's not everybody gets either of those opportunities to either be married or to have kids for the cards that we're dealt with in life. And it's been a really, really kind of a fulfilling experience, joyful and painful at the same time. I think volunteering in the community, like we talked about, anytime you think you can help people, whether it's, you find out a neighbor's sick and you bring them some chicken noodle soup, or a few years ago with my kids when they were younger, my youngest had this great idea. And as with the kids, we packed up backpacks because he found out in walking to school and passing by some homeless kids or homeless families that he spoke with them, and they all felt that they needed backpacks to carry things in. And so we did it as a family and put together I think it was 20 or 30 backpacks with hygiene kits and food and all that type of stuff, and went and hand them out to homeless. Anytime you can do something like that, it's nothing that has notoriety or that type of thing, but those private opportunities to be able to help people, I think is really, really meaningful. And then kind of getting back to, I guess, why you wanted to interview me, being able to be a part of new businesses that are making a positive impact, that have a social impact, I find really, really meaningful, because there's a lot of ways to work. There's a lot of ways to make money. But getting out of bed in the morning and knowing that you're going to work on something that not only has the potential to make money, but also has the potential to really make a positive impact in people's lives, that's awesome. That's really fulfilling.
Definitely. Definitely. Of all the decisions you make, we make hundreds of decisions on a daily basis, over tens of thousands throughout our lifetime. What is one decision that you would say you've made that has been the most significant and most meaningful in your life?
Oh, I think that there are decisions that we make in life that, I guess if you make someone once taught me that if you make a good decision, that will increase the decisions you get to make in the future. And if you make a bad decision, it may restrict the decisions that you make in the future.
Hmm.
And so I think there are big decisions like that are almost like, do I take, the Robert Frost idea? Do I take the path less traveled by, where you're going down and there's a fork in the road, and you have those kind of decisions. But then there's also the small decisions that you make every single day, which I think add up to kind of who you are as a person. And so if I were to look at decisions each of those ways, I would say my mom used to tell me something a lot when I was a kid. And she would say, everything happens for a reason, Brian. Every time I would come home as a kid crying about something or sad about something, she would always try to frame my mindset that even if it was a really crappy, bad situation, whatever it was, that there was a reason why it was happening, that there was something to learn from it. And I just need to figure out what that was. And so I think that always kind of gave me a perpetually optimistic view of whatever the difficult situation was. And I think the decision to actually believe that, being a parent, having been a kid, you don't always believe what your parents tell you. I know my
Mhm.
kids didn't always believe what I told them. But I think really believing what my mom said there and applying that in my life has definitely been one of the more meaningful um, and significant decisions that I have made and have to pretty much make every single day, because you're always dealing with things that don't turn out the way you want them to, that seem unfair. Life's unfair. And you just have to figure out and say, okay, this happened for a reason. What was the reason? Did I do something to contribute to this situation? And now this is a consequence of a bad decision. Is this a challenge that I'm being given to grow and to learn from? Um, there's just kind of unpacking the why behind why something's happening. I think that's probably the most meaningful and significant decision I've made in my life when it comes to like something that you do every day. And then big decision wise, I would probably say when I was 17 and I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that was probably one of the more significant decisions in my life, because that kind of put me on a pathway in my life that has influenced kind of my you know, role as a dad, as a husband, my kind of religious understanding and perspective on things. It's probably been very, very big, because that permeates almost every aspect of my life.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Now, in this world of building connections, co-creating, there's always a lot of opportunities to make new connections from folks. I had to come up with 8 key characteristics I look for to identify if I want to make a connection with somebody that's a system engineer in me. I'm curious to know, do you have any key characteristics that you look for when you're establishing new connection?
Yeah, I would say intelligence and integrity going together. Um, I think those are really, really important. Um, Obviously, sharing passion and being mission driven. But I would say, and intelligence isn't necessarily like a bunch of letters after your name and some degree and that type of thing. I've met some people that have PhDs and those type of things that I didn't particularly think were very smart. Um, and so what I mean by intelligence is people that, um, they're able to synthesize information. They're able to listen and analyze and really kind of think through things. They're good thinkers, probably is a great way to say it. And then integrity. I think integrity is really, really important. I think those two things, just kind of being a really good thinker and having a high level of integrity, there aren't really things that you can learn or teach somebody. If they don't have it, I don't think there's anything per se you're going to do that's going to change that. But I found that if when I connect with people that are really smart, good thinkers, and have a high level of integrity, I hold on to those relationships for a really, really long time. And I think that those are really important. When I was younger and less experienced, um, because gosh, I believe in a God of limitless second chances. And if I didn't have limitless second chances, I think I would be totally screwed, right? But I used to be that way in giving people a lot of second chances in business. If they would do something to stab you in the back or not tell the truth on something or whatever, I would be like, okay, well, let's just forgive them and give them another chance and that type of thing. And there's a great quote from Maya Angelou. It's something to the effect of, she said it far more articulate than I'm going to say it now, but it was something like, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Um, and I learned that kind of the hard way. Um, and I think that, unfortunately, people make some bad decisions, and some people lack integrity in this world. And so if you find people that follow through on what they say and are honest with you and are vulnerable, and I think those are people that you hold on to. People that just read off their resume and make it seem like everything they touch turns to gold, and they have King Midas's touch. I don't think that that's real. I think that sometimes you learn a lot about people and can connect with people in hearing their stories. and learning the difficulties that they've gone through and the challenges that they've overcome. I think that that's really important. I heard this talk once where this lady said, you couldn't help but love somebody if you could read their whole story. And I think that's really true. It's one of the first things I always ask people when I meet them the first time is, tell me your story. And when people are vulnerable and they talk about things that they've experienced in their life that are good, challenges that they've dealt with, there's just a great way to connect with people that way.
Definitely. Wise words there. This leads to another question. In my business, I'm a connector. I love helping conscious leaders to build relationships and connect what I call strategic partners, but make sure they find the right strategic partner for their business. And with that being said, who would you say would be a great strategic partner for you?
I think it's probably dependent on what we're partnering over. I think there's personal partnerships, there's community partnerships, there's business partnerships. But I think when you have a shared purpose, a shared vision, you may be coming from different places, but you're moving to the same point on the horizon line. A shared purpose. There's a great scripture. I can't remember where it is off the top of my head right now. I just read it a couple days ago, but it talks about basically, having a shared understanding to be able to walk together, to understand each other, to be able to walk together. And I think that, when you are able to create that bond of understanding with people, you're able to walk together, so to speak. And I think that's where kind of a strategic partnership can come into place. I've had relationships that, you get to know somebody and you just feel a connection with them, but there's no there at the beginning. But then 3 or 4 years later, something comes up and you're able to reach out to this person and say, hey, I'm doing this right now, or I'm involved in this, and I think this is something that we could work on together. And, you never know when those opportunities will arise. But I think if you have shared vision or shared purpose or a shared sense of principles, an opportunity to collaborate will always arise.
Alignment is definitely important. Now, I notice that each time you and I have interacted, and definitely today, you've always bring to the table a certain amount of enthusiastic energy. Your energy level always seems to be an 8 or 9 or a 10. And I'm curious to know, are there any morning rituals that you go through to kind of put yourself in this positive state of mind?
Yeah, I'm a routine person. I thrive on routines. I don't know if that's a good thing, a good reflection on my character, or a bad. I don't know, but I'm like a to-do list type person, that type of thing. I pray every morning. I read the scriptures every morning. I do like some little like emotional intelligence type rituals to kind of focus on being present, because sometimes I'll get caught up in an emotion around something. And so it's important for me to focus on staying present. I review my weekly to-do list and check off the things that I'm achieving. That gives me great satisfaction to check things off. I review my calendar for the day in the morning. I believe that we are in many ways a function of our environments. It's a balance between nature and nurture. We have kind of who we are, but the things we surround ourselves with influence us. And so it's not just necessarily those things we say no to that we don't want to listen to or don't want to see, but also the things we say yes to. So I try to listen to uplifting music, uplifting media, videos, inspirational things that are positive. I like working out in the morning. That helps me get my brain going and my body feeling good. I was feeling under the weather this morning, so I didn't exercise this morning. So I'll hopefully try to do that later on today. But yeah, I think it's really, really important for me to have morning rituals to help me be kind of disciplined and focused.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, is there a keen connection you would like to meet? When I mean by that, I don't necessarily referring to my name or my company name, but I'm referring to a label I place on an individual who's achieved a certain success in life, whether it's career, professional, or personal, that we admire. And that if we were to actually meet this person and actually build with this person, co-create, we can make some great things happen. So it's not meeting someone as a fan, but as a potential co-creator. Like, for example, mine would be someone like Magic Johnson, not because he was a great basketball player. I actually didn't like him as a basketball player, as a Piston fan, but mainly because he is a great businessman. He's a community advocate. He's a great connector, and he's just a person that always brings a lot of energy and resources to everything he's involved in. And so my question now for you would be, who would be a great king connection? Because I've developed a methodology and a system that I believe anybody is connectable, reachable, especially if you connect and you align on principle and purpose. So who would a person be that you would like to connect with?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I have a kind of quick answer to that. I think that, I love the organization that you've put together, and we've talked about collaborating on doing some really cool things in the city of Baltimore and that type of thing. And so I don't, gosh, I don't know if I could pick off somebody off the top of my head. Actually, I have met Magic Johnson. I met him a few years ago, believe it or not. My last company, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was a client, and he's a really fascinating man, really, really great guy. And I knew him and his agent, and they were having his 70th birthday party at Staples Center. And so I was able to take my two sons with me there. And it was a really neat experience because I got to meet Magic Johnson and get a picture with him and meet James Worthy and meet Jenny Buss and all these different people with the Lakers organization. I didn't grow up as a Lakers fan per se, but you can't help but have a measure of reverence for the Lakers as an institution. And when they do their introduction, they drop these curtains down and they show like these videos during the beginning, the pregame of their history as a basketball player and a basketball fan. It was almost like a religious experience to see that. It was really, really powerful. But I think it just probably depends on what aspect of life you're talking about. Whether it's someone who is in the business world that you'd love to meet and be able to just kind of pick their brain on and gain from their perspectives, whether it's someone in the community that's, made a huge impact that you'd love to kind of, learn from their experiences and their bumps and bruises. I don't know if I have an exact answer to that, but I think that as we continue our discussions, King, and try to do some, good in the world, especially in some of these urban centers that have been so neglected, I think there's going to be religious leaders, political leaders, business leaders that their hearts will be in the right place, and we'll be able to say, hey, we'd love to share with you what we're talking about doing and the great things we'd like to do, and we'd love your insights. I think one of the things I've learned in life, when I was really young, I thought it was a sign of weakness to ask for help. During kind of that same time I was talking about when I was talking to Mr. McGregor, when I was say probably 16 to 20 something, I felt like, okay, to be strong and to be capable, I had to figure out the answers and those type of things. And that if I asked for help, it was a sign of weakness. And I've definitely learned that asking for help is not a sign of weakness at all. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of humility. It's a sign of understanding that principle of co-creation you were talking about beforehand. And I think there's a lot of people to ask for help. And I think people enjoy being able to help others. And so it invites a bond with others.
That's one of the best answers I got on that question so far. Especially if someone says they've met my king connection. So, one step closer. All right. Now, my final question, and I always like to end with this question because I learned so much about a person and I get some great information about what books I like to read as well. What book would you recommend? I know it's difficult to try to find one book, but if you can find one or maybe several books that come to mind that you would say for our listening audience has been the most influential, most impactful, and you highly recommend they read this particular book or a series of books.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good books. um, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on kind of the answers you're looking for. I mean, for me, at the risk of, I know I've been kind of overtly talking about it so much, but from my religious belief standpoints, I love reading scripture, and whether it's the Bible. For me, I also read the Book of Mormon every day. That's not a book that's maybe as widely read as the Bible is, but it is. The thing that I love about scriptures is that it's not just reading the words that are there. I mean, gosh, I've read the Bible and the Book of Mormon dozens of times now over the years. And every time I read them, I get something more out of it. Even though I'm doing I'm reading the same words over and over again. It's often been said, if you want to talk to God, pray. And if you want to hear from God, read scripture, type situation. And so if someone hasn't read from the Book of Mormon, there's a wonderful promise in there that when you read it, then you can ask God and pray about it to see if it's true. I think that's an awesome way to test whether something's true or not, is to pray to whoever you believe your creator is. I think that, some books about life, like Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl, has got to be one of the best books ever.
I agree.
When it comes to, just dealing with kind of how you work through adversity, because adversity is something we're all going to deal with. It doesn't make you a bad person to have to deal with adversity. It's kind of how you handle it that makes you strong. As someone who likes to work out, you don't make your muscles stronger by lifting light things. It's lifting heavy things, right? And so life gives us a lot of heavy things that we have to figure out how to lift. And then I'm reading a book right now that I think is really kind of interesting. It's called Difficult Conversations. And it's really kind of all about, we all will have difficult conversations in our family and our work situation, whatever it may be. And the ability to be able to really turn those difficult conversations into a connection where you can really actively listen and understand where the person's coming from, even if they're personally critical of you. And not be defensive, but be able to diffuse that situation and really understand it and turn it into a meaningful connection. I'm really enjoying reading that. I've gone through some personal travails over the past few years and probably didn't handle some of those conversations the way I would have wanted to. And when now I look back on it in hindsight, and reading the particular book that I'm reading right now called Difficult Conversations, I found to be really enlightening, like thinking, darn it, I wish I'd read this book so much earlier. There's so many difficult conversations over the past, 30 years since I was a teenager that I would have handled differently if I had known what I was reading now. I guess that's that old shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of situation. But I love reading books. I think it's one of the sad things about this newer generation. They don't read books as much anymore. And gosh, there's so much to learn from reading what people have written down, whatever that is.
Absolutely. You shared some great words of wisdom today. You've been very vulnerable and honest. Definitely appreciate that. And I definitely want to thank you for your investment again of time and energy. And I want to give you an opportunity to share any closing thoughts that you may have, as well as your contact information for folks who might want to co-create with you.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Brian Meshkin. My personal website's brianmeshkin.com. My Profound Ventures website is profoundvc.com, and my consulting website is Stratus, STRATYSS.com. My email is brian@profoundvc.com or brian@brianmeshkin.com. Feel free to reach out to me over email. From a closing thought standpoint, I'm really happy with what you're doing, King, and grateful to be a connection of yours. I think that oftentimes, I remember when I started my first company, a guy that was advising me made this comment, which we've all heard, that Brian, business is business. And he was using that cliche to justify, almost in a way, that your principles in business are different than your principles that you would have in your personal life. And I don't believe that at all. Most of us, when you think about your day, probably spend more time working than we do other things. And, I love your idea that you are, evangelizing out there around spiritual capitalism, that those personal principles we can manifest and we can apply in the things that we are doing that have financial implications, whether it's our personal finance, whether it's our professional endeavors. And I think that that's really, really important, because whether it's people in government, people in business, whatever, seem to compromise what would be personal values all the time under some cliche that business is business, or whatever the cliche is, as a justification. And if people were just kind and people were just supportive and those type of things, good old fashioned love thy neighbor as thyself, it's amazing how many problems would be solved. And so I'm just grateful to be associated with you, and hope that you continue to share this with people and connect people, because I think we can do a lot of good in the world that way, because certainly there are plenty of powers that be in government and in other places that will try to keep divisions keep divisions happening, keep conflict happening. And it's not necessary, and we can do better.
Definitely. Definitely. And I definitely appreciate everything you said. I look forward to the infinite possibilities that our relationship will bring. So
Sounds good.
again, Brian, thank you again for your investment, time, energy. You have a blessed and productive remaining part of your day. And listening audience, until our next episode of King Connections podcast, I wish everyone a blessed and productive day as well. Thank you.
Thank you, King.